Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly chats. Thanks for joining me again. This week's topic comes from just some things I've been doing and came across it as we come to the end of the school year. Especially if you're a parent and your kids are involved in all these end of school year activities, uh, we start talking about the school, yearbooks, graduation, and we start thinking about that. And I start thinking about the history of the school and some various aspects of it. And one of the things that we're working on as part of my job is we're doing an exhibit of high school yearbooks. And so as we're putting together that exhibit, one of the questions that came up was, why are our school colors blue and white? And we take this for granted, right? East Aurora, blue and white. It's been that way for a long, long time. We're the Blue Devils, that's our mascot. And so we just kind of take it for granted. Well, one time, I think this was by accident, I've written about this a couple years ago, several years ago now, um, and I came across why we are blue and white. And one of the questions that always been in my head had been in my head, and maybe in some of yours, or maybe it's just now that we're talking about it, you're thinking about it, is whether the blue devil came before the colors, or do the colors come before the blue devil? And the answer is quite simple, but it did take a bit of time to find. And I found a part of it by accident because it was referred to years later, and then I went back into the archives of the Easter Advertiser and found the answer. And actually, it goes back to the colors came first, and it goes back to the year 1901. And what happened, really simply, is the principal of the high school thought at that point a lot of colleges were starting to come up with official colors, branding for not only sports but just the school in general. And they were also coming up with mascots, and that's something that came along a little bit later. But the principal of the high school in the autumn of 1901, so as the 1901-1902 school year was starting, uh, thought East Aurora should have school colors. So they put together two committees. One, a committee of four high school female students, and then a committee of four male high school students. And they were to come up with their suggestions for school colors. And we don't know a whole lot of detail about it because it was literally a one paragraph item in the Easter Advertiser, buried, as you would say, in the newspaper. And the committees came up with their suggestions, and the suggestions were from the boys was blue and white, and not just any blue, it was Yale blue, so the colors of Yale University, and it's a specific blue, so that was blue and white from the boys. The girls suggested olive green and white. Imagine that. So, of course, I don't have to tell you which one won, but and the Easter Advertiser in their little one paragraph article did not mention what the point spread was, but they said that blue and white won by a small majority. My guess being that the girls were pushing the olive green and white, and the boys were campaigning for the blue and white. And maybe there were a few more boys than girls. I'm not saying that all boys voted one way and all girls voted the other, but it seemed like those were the camps and the two contenders. So and it said the Easter Advertiser put in their little article that Yale blue and white carried the day. And the rest, of course, is history. We have been blue and white since then. And as a result of that, think of how much of our identity, our school identity, revolves around the school colors. Even the school signs. We have a school budget vote today. If you're watching live today on Tuesday, our school colors, the school signs. Later came along the Blue Devil, and that was in 1934. I talked about that before, and I've written about that before. Is the Blue Devil came from inspired by Duke. So as the color was inspired by Yale blue, Duke inspired the Blue Devil, which of course, even though the imagery today is of a devil, and so the yearbooks. I'm going to check to make sure you can see this because there we go. The 1994 yearbook has the Blue Devil on. Even though that's the imagery, it's actually the Blue Devil comes from a French World War One fight Air Force um, uh, uh, group that was known for its blue uniform and its bravery. And so Duke took that as their mascot, and we took it from them. And it has nothing to do, even though some people throughout history of East Aurora have tried to change the mascot, saying the Blue Devil was inappropriate. The devil imagery we see is not what it originally was. It was this World War One fighting Air Force group that was known for its bravery, and it had these uniforms that gave it this blue devil look. So a different definition. However, so because we had the colors to begin with, blue and white, the Blue Devil came out of that. So had we not had blue and white as our school colors, we probably would not have the Blue Devil as our mascot for East Aurora. And imagine if we were olive green and white, perfectly good colors, but who knows what our mascot would have been when mascots came along later. Similarly to the colors of the school, at the time in the 1930s, a lot of universities were coming up with school mascots. It's hard to imagine that school mascots weren't really a thing until the early 20th century. So the late 1800s, we were actually known as the East Aurorans before we were known as the Blue Devils. So the idea of a mascot was fairly new. Now every school has one, and some of them are controversial, and we're talking about that and discussing that. But schools didn't have mascots, and so, but when in 1930s, East Aurora decided to adopt the Blue Devil. And now everything, our identity is related, right? So all the school yearbooks are blue. I gathered some school yearbooks as we were doing the exhibit. Most of the ones throughout the history of the school are blue and white. Not all of them, so that's why you should come see the exhibit after June 1st. And one of the other things I noticed too is as much as the school colors were adopted in 1901, and we had official school colors from that point moving forward, and it's always been blue and white since then. A lot of the graduation programs, graduation invitations, some of the yearbooks were not blue and white. And that's most likely because each class adopted their own class colors. And some of you may remember that. I know in my mom's generation, each class had a school color, had a school motto, or a class motto, class colors. And so those were generally adopted. So if a class had red and white as their class colors, the graduation program would adopt those colors, or the yearbook that year would have those colors. Not as much so the yearbook. So the blue and white school color thing didn't always apply because the classes would have their own colors, or there'd be a design creativity with the design. But in recent history, blue and white has, as they said in the advertiser, 1901, carried the day, and most everything that you see related to the school district is blue and white. Even the newsletter that comes out, the signs on the school buildings, the logos, blue and white has just been adopted as the school colors. And it does help with branding. You see it and you know it's East Aurora school colors. But I find it interesting that the reason we do this and the reason we have blue and white is because of the high school students in 1901 and a committee of 4 girls and 4 boys. And again, I don't know who was on those committees. It'd be interesting to know. The news reports did not give that information. But the fact that essentially 8 students who came up with, or 4 students on the one side, the winning side, came up with these colors, and then the school voted on it. And forever since then, we've had blue and white. So we have the students of 1901-1902 school year to thank for our blue and white. So that answers the question some of us have had as we go through the old school yearbooks and our school papers and things like that in the archives, as we see a lot of blue and white, and it dates back pretty far, 1901. So that was the question this week. Again, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop a line. This is what I love to do, answer questions like this. And you can either put them in the comments or send me a private message. That's okay too. And again, some people still ask about whether or not they missed the 3 o'clock on Tuesday live stream. It's okay. They're all available, so feel free to share, like the page if you're not doing so already. All right. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.